I'm a 29-year-old guy and I've been married to Ava, who's 27, for 2 years. Both Ava and I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other, and most folks attended the same local church. When I was 10 years old, my family moved to that town, and we started going to the same church as Ava's parents. We were basically raised there. A couple of years ago, I graduated from college and decided to return to my hometown. I was already accustomed to the calm, quiet, and simple life there, and that's when Ava and I began dating. I had secretly admired her for years, and finally, the chance came for us to be together. We fell deeply in love and got married after a year of dating. Our wedding was a small affair, and both the church and our parents were delighted with our union. They even chipped in to support our modest wedding. Now, the interesting thing is that Ava and I chose not to be intimate before our wedding. She insisted that we should wait until our wedding night, and despite my attempts to persuade her otherwise, I eventually agreed. While I had become less involved with the church, Ava remained fully devoted. She attended all the church programs, meetings, and events. She was even part of the evangelism team, and every weekend she went out with them to pray and spread the word. During our courtship, we limited ourselves to kissing, and she never agreed to spend the night at my place. She believed in saving herself for our wedding night, as she considered it against God's wishes to be intimate before marriage. Throughout the time I waited for Ava and me to tie the knot and finally be together physically, I believed she was a virgin. She never disclosed otherwise, so I naturally assumed she was. It was only on our wedding night that I discovered she wasn't. She confessed that she had been intimate with her previous boyfriends, but had chosen to change her ways. It took me some time to overcome the disappointment, and I tried my best not to let it affect our new marriage. Apart from discovering that she had previous relationships, which she hadn't shared with me, Ava was a loving partner. She treated me with respect and kindness. Her presence had a comforting and lively vibe, and she warmly welcomed both acquaintances and strangers. My job involved working as a driver for a logistics company, while Ava chose to be a stay-at-home wife so she could dedicate more time to her religious activities. Despite my modest income, I did my best to make ends meet. Aside from my earnings, Ava received a stipend from the church for her charitable work, which she used to cover her personal expenses. After our marriage, I anticipated that Ava's commitment to the church might diminish, allowing us to focus more on building our family. I didn't mind her staying at home, but I expected that we would have quality time together. However, that didn't happen. She attended church almost daily, either for midweek services, departmental meetings, evangelism, or other church-related activities. Frequently, this meant we couldn't spend quality time together because she was out at church almost every evening. When she returned home in the evenings, she would simply have dinner and head to bed. On weekends, Ava left the house in the morning for various meetings, charity events, or other church commitments. She would return briefly in the afternoon before going out again and returning late at night. I expressed my concerns about her excessive involvement in the church and the lack of time we spent together. However, her response was always the same. I should have understood what I was getting into when I proposed to her. This was her consistent reply, and she would leave whenever she said it. My complaints often escalated into arguments, leading to periods of silence between us lasting 2 to 3 days. Before our marriage, we discussed the topic of having children and agreed to wait at least a year after getting married before starting a family. We felt that, given our somewhat distant relationship during our dating phase, the first year of marriage would be a valuable opportunity to strengthen our connection. However, this plan didn't unfold as expected. Within that first year, Ava underwent a significant transformation. She seemed like a completely different person from the Ava I knew during our dating period, and this wasn't what I had envisioned for our married life. Our main source of contention revolved around her unwavering commitment to attending church, which created a divide in our marriage. Despite my repeated complaints, she remained steadfast in her church activities. Due to the nature of my job, I couldn't accompany her to midweek services and other church programs. And even when I had the opportunity, I preferred to spend my time differently. Whenever I voiced my concerns, she portrayed me as if I were against her faith, which wasn't the case. I was simply trying to convey the importance of balancing her religious commitments with our relationship. After a year had passed and we still hadn't started a family, I broached the subject with her. However, she didn't seem interested in discussing it. She straightforwardly told me that she was preoccupied with her religious duties, implying that I should support her rather than focusing on having children. At that point, I was exhausted from her behavior, so I decided to confide in her parents. I shared everything about Ava's actions, including how she neglected me, our home, and her responsibilities as a wife. When her parents heard about her actions, they were taken aback by her behavior. A few days after I had spoken to her parents, Ava confronted me, and she was furious. She went as far as insulting me and using hurtful names after I reported her actions to her parents. Reflecting on this story now, I regret not walking away when her behavior and neglect first began. I pondered that choice many times, but due to my love for her, I chose to overlook her mistreatment, brushed aside her neglect, and persisted in trying to salvage our relationship. Despite Ava's shifting demeanor and her prioritization of her religious duties over our relationship, I still held a deep affection for her and continued to treat her with love. I took on most of the household chores because she was rarely present to tend to our home. I handled cooking, laundry, grocery shopping, and all other domestic responsibilities. We continued in this manner for another year until she became pregnant at the end of the second year. Ava's announcement of her pregnancy brought me immense joy. I knew that as her pregnancy progressed, she would reduce her church attendance, and that's precisely what occurred. In the early stages of her pregnancy, she remained active in attending church, but by her second trimester, she started staying home. One of the reasons for her reduced church attendance was her pregnancy's complications, which prompted her doctor to advise against strenuous activities. With Ava no longer able to attend church activities regularly, her fellow church members began visiting her instead. They would visit as a group on some days, while individual members would visit on other days. Almost every time they came to see Ava, they brought gifts, fruits, and other items to satisfy her cravings. Their outpouring of love and concern didn't surprise me, given Ava's unwavering dedication to her church. Many families had known her since childhood and treated her like their own daughter. In addition to regular church member visits, our church pastor also came to our house every week. He was the one who brought fruits and other items for Ava. I noticed that whenever our church pastor visited, Ava would have a radiant and excited expression on her face, although I didn't think much of it at the time. Many times I would arrive home from work in the evening to find his car parked in our driveway. Occasionally I'd leave them at home while I ran errands or took care of things outside. I didn't think much of it because he was our pastor, and I trusted that Ava wouldn't engage in anything that went against our faith. Our pastor continued to visit our home for weeks, regularly bringing items for Ava. I maintained my job as a driver for a logistics company and took on an evening side job. With Ava's pregnancy, there were increased demands and changes at home. I had to be extremely supportive and attend to her needs, even on sleepless nights. It took a toll on me, but I knew it was essential for her to get enough rest. During our pastor's visits, one noticeable thing was the substantial amount of money he would give Ava. When this happened repeatedly, I started questioning Ava. It didn't sit right with me that her pastor was giving her such a significant sum of money each week. Ava initially brushed it off, saying he was just being generous and helping her as he would anyone else. However, after several arguments, she promised to stop accepting money from him. I wanted to believe her explanation about the pastor helping her like he would anyone else. But I had an uneasy feeling about it. As the pastor's visits continued, I grew increasingly uncomfortable. Their relationship seemed to be growing closer, and I suspected they were discussing matters behind my back. I distinctly remember one afternoon when the pastor visited, and I offered to make fresh juice for him. I left them in the living room and overheard them whispering about something from the hallway. However, as soon as I entered the living room, they pretended to engage in normal conversation at regular volumes. On another occasion, when I got back home from work, our pastor promptly left upon my arrival. It felt awkward, and my instincts kept signaling that something was amiss. Ava's behavior that evening, after our pastor's departure, only served to confirm my suspicions. I initially thought I could easily dismiss these suspicions, but every time I observed Ava and our pastor together, those doubts resurfaced. Moreover, due to my complaints about the amount of money Ava received from our pastor, she ceased informing me about it and started concealing it. I wouldn't have been aware that she was still receiving money from him if I hadn't decided to tidy up one of our clothing drawers one day. Upon stumbling upon the stash of money, I was taken aback. I also felt disappointed that Ava had been keeping this information from me. She had led me to believe she had ceased accepting money from our pastor. Initially, I contemplated confronting her regarding the money, but I recognized that it might jeopardize my chances of uncovering the truth about their relationship. I had witnessed our pastor praying for her and the baby on numerous occasions, and she claimed that was the primary reason for his frequent visits to our home. I wanted to capture our impending conversation, so I discreetly activated my phone's camera. Jenny seemed taken aback to find me home so early and was further startled to see the pistol by my side. I brushed off her inquiries and directed her attention to the videos on the computer. Her face displayed shock, but she quickly tried to regain her composure. Instead of remorse, she spoke with a twisted sense of pride, even going as far as to suggest she'd bring John over more often now that the cat was out of the bag. I was taken aback by her audacity, and for the first time ever, I spoke to her with raw anger. I told her she needed to leave. Jenny responded with threats, hinting that she and her partners in crime were capable of fabricating all sorts of lies to tarnish my reputation. She mentioned possibly framing me for awful crimes, hinting that they had the tools to edit videos and set people up. I remained unyielding, challenging her plans and refusing to be manipulated. In a moment of anger, I removed her rings and stripped her of the house key. Even as she left, she attempted to bargain, asking me to rethink my decision. I stood my ground, ensuring the whole confrontation was captured on my phone, ready to present it as evidence to Sally the following day. I couldn't believe what I saw. It was far worse than I ever expected. I'll admit, I was unsure how to react. But when I heard Ava moaning in pleasure, it drove me mad. I don't even recall getting out of my car and sprinting to our house. My anger surged, and I forcefully opened the door and confronted our pastor. I knew I couldn't touch Ava due to her pregnancy, so I vented my anger on him. If it weren't for Ava stepping in, the pastor might have passed out. I was heartbroken and didn't know what to say to them. He hastily left the house with just his underpants and clothes in hand. After he departed, Ava started sobbing uncontrollably. She claimed it wasn't what I thought, and that the pastor had come to pray for her and the baby. I couldn't believe Ava was still trying to deceive me after I caught her in the act with our pastor. I was furious, but I made an effort to control my anger. It dawned on me that Ava had been having an affair with our pastor, which explained why he kept giving her money. I questioned her about the duration of her relationship with him, but she vehemently denied any involvement. Given her response, I knew she wouldn't admit to it, so I kicked her out of my house, and all she had on her were her bathrobe and flip-flops. Outside the house, Ava pleaded with me to let her in until the neighbors came out to inquire about the commotion. Fortunately, one of them offered to drive Ava to her parents' house, and that's how she left. Before she reached her parents' house, I made sure to call them first and inform them of what I had witnessed. Initially, her parents didn't believe me, but once his Ava arrived at their home, they started bombarding my phone with calls. I chose not to answer their calls because I wasn't in the mood to talk. All of this unfolded 3 weeks ago, and since then, I've been unable to think clearly. Ava consumes my thoughts, and it's painful to accept that despite all my efforts to be a great husband, she cheated on me with our pastor. Right now, I'm utterly confused and don't know what to do. I had always envisioned us raising our children together, not as divorced parents. However, I cannot live with a cheater. No, I haven't informed the church yet about her infidelity. She and our pastor have been calling me every day, and our pastor has been texting me, urging us to meet and talk. Update 1. I appreciate your comments, and you're absolutely right. I should have paid attention to the warning signs right from the start. They were glaringly obvious, but I clung to our marriage. So, 2 days ago, on a Sunday, I encountered our pastor at church. It was an open area, just as some of you had suggested. Interestingly, he seemed nervous when he saw me walk into the church that morning. I had skipped church for 5 weeks, and my presence seemed to unsettle him. After the service, he summoned me to his office and pleaded with me not to disclose what I had witnessed. At least he was more cautious than Ava. I took advantage of the situation to inquire about the duration of his affair with Ava. Guess what, folks? He claimed it had started before Ava and I even began dating. This meant he had been involved with her while she was deceiving me. I felt utterly devastated upon hearing that revelation. Ava had not only betrayed me through infidelity, but had also made a complete fool out of me. I wanted to confront him right then and there, but the church was filled with people, and such an outburst would derail my plans. So, I kept my composure. I had expected to see Ava at church too, but she was conspicuously absent. Even her parents didn't attend. Prior to catching Ava and our pastor, I had heard rumors about our pastor's involvement with young girls in the church, but no one had the courage to confront him about it. At that point, I didn't need to inquire whether he had been misusing church funds because it was apparent. The church collected weekly donations, and I suspected he used the money for his own purposes. After our pastor implored me not to expose his affair with Ava, I proposed a condition for my silence. He had to confess to the entire congregation that he had been misappropriating church funds for his personal needs. I wanted to impart a lesson, And surprisingly, he consented. He agreed to make the announcement the following Sunday and seek forgiveness from the church. I had a gut feeling that he wasn't being truthful. He wouldn't agree to humiliate himself like that unless he had some hidden agenda. Just yesterday, Ava reached out using a different phone number. Over the past few weeks, she called repeatedly until I had to block her. She claimed she had come to my house multiple times, but no one answered. I left my house 3 days after kicking her out because I couldn't get the image of them being intimate in my living room out of my mind. She mentioned not wanting to raise the baby on her own and asked for a second chance to prove she had changed. Hilarious. She has no clue what's in store for her. I informed her that I would only consider taking responsibility for the child if we conducted a paternity test and the results confirmed that I was the father. Once we go through with this, I'll provide another update. Thank you everyone for your comments. Update 2. Hello everyone. I want to express my deep gratitude to this community for the incredible support I've received. I also want to apologize for the delay in providing this update. So, after I brought up the idea of a paternity test to Ava, she initially resisted, claiming I was making things unnecessarily complicated for her. I suspected she might have had doubts about me being the baby's father. Eventually, we did go through with the paternity test, and it turned out I wasn't the baby's father. I had a hunch this would be the outcome right from the moment she opposed the idea of the test. Her parents were understandably disappointed when they learned the truth and asked her who the real father was. She couldn't bring herself to answer them. I knew the answer, and I informed them that it was indeed our pastor. Words can't adequately convey how shattered I felt. We received the test results on the day of our church's midweek service, so I decided to pay our pastor a visit. Even if the child had turned out to be mine, I had already made up my mind to divorce Ava. I had already contacted a lawyer to prepare the divorce papers, which were ready by the time of our confrontation. When I arrived at the church, I walked straight to the front to address everyone. Our pastor was the one delivering the sermon and refused to hand me the microphone when I requested it. He understood my intentions and tried to signal me to stop, but I ignored him. When he continued to deny me the mic, I raised my voice to ensure everyone could hear me. I exposed our pastor's misconduct and shared the truth with everyone, leaving them in shock. I realized it was impractical to show them the footage, so I played a voice recording of our last conversation with our pastor, where he confessed to his affair with Ava and misusing church funds. He had no idea I had recorded that conversation, and I didn't inform him either. His expression when he heard the recording was priceless. He was taken aback by the fact that I had recorded our conversation, making it irrefutable evidence in case he tried to deny it. With the evidence presented, I was confident it would have a profound impact on his career and marriage, and it did. The church was deeply disappointed in him and he was demoted. Additionally, the church lost many members because they regarded our pastor as a paragon of virtue who consistently preached against closeness immorality. So, their disappointment was palpable when they discovered he wasn't practicing what he preached. As for Ava, despite all her pleas and her parents' intervention, we have gone through with the divorce. She is currently approaching her due date and residing with her parents, who, despite their disappointment, have taken her in. After exposing our pastor, I stopped attending church, fully aware that news of the scandal had spread rapidly throughout the town, becoming a topic of conversation for almost everyone. Ava has lost many friends and well-wishers as a result. The last I heard about Ava's affair partner, I was informed that his wife had divorced him, and he was asked to provide records of all the funds he had used for church purposes during his tenure as pastor. It's safe to say we can predict how that will turn out. While I still carry the pain and hurt from Ava's infidelity, it's preferable to remaining married to a cheater. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your support throughout this ordeal. I truly appreciate each and every one of you.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I'm a 33-year-old guy, and I've been married to Summer, who's 28, for 4 years. But then something terrible happened. Summer and I crossed paths right after I finished college. We both went through the same job training program, and that's where we fell in love. Initially, we didn't confess our feelings. It took me some time to open up to her. The truth is, I didn't want to rush into things because I'd just gotten out of a really bad relationship, and I didn't want to repeat that mistake. Eventually, we got closer and we both admitted we were into each other. We officially started dating after that. 2 years down the line, we tied the knot and moved into a bigger place. Living with Summer and learning more about her every day was a lot of fun. I especially liked her personality because she always had surprises up her sleeve. As newlyweds, we were crazy about each other and did everything together. We ate, shopped, bathed, and even prayed together. I'd read somewhere that spending quality time with your partner helps strengthen your relationship. So that's exactly what we did. Before we got married, Summer and I made a pact not to have kids until we were both ready so we could enjoy each other's company without any distractions. Summer worked as a secretary at a big tech company, while I worked as a construction worker. Our combined income was enough to support our simple yet comfortable lifestyle, and we worked hard, hoping for better career opportunities in the future. Personality-wise, Summer was the more outgoing one. She could make friends with anyone. In contrast, I was the complete opposite. I didn't make many friends and was only really close to my older brother. Summer had a very close friend named Claire, and they had been friends since their early school days. On my side, I mostly stuck to my brother as it was hard for me to open up to new people. I had a few friends, but none of them were close enough to be called a best friend. Summer and her best friend were incredibly close, to the point where they could easily be mistaken for sisters. They both had blonde hair, the same eye color, and similar personalities. Claire felt like a part of our family, and we visited each other's homes frequently. Claire worked as a lawyer, and her husband had his own business. From time to time, we would plan family outings and always managed to hang out at least twice a month. Being an introvert, I made an effort to build a strong relationship with Claire's husband. But no matter how hard I tried, our interactions always felt forced and awkward. Despite these feelings, I never complained when Summer and Claire arranged outings or family vacations. I understood that Summer just wanted us to have fun and take a break from work. I also saw these opportunities as a way to overcome my introverted tendencies. It's important to note that Claire's husband was not a stranger to me at all. Summer was also very close to him, and they had known each other for at least 2 years before I entered the picture. I had no reason to suspect anything unusual between them until Claire asked to meet with me in a cafe one day. When I met Claire that day, she appeared worried, and the first thing she said to me was, "I believe my husband is being unfaithful." At first, I was puzzled because her husband didn't seem like the type to cheat. He loved her deeply and treated her like the most important person in the world whenever we went out for dinner, picnics, or visited their home for meals. It reached a point where Summer started comparing me to Claire's husband. After our team hangouts, she frequently pointed out the things Claire's husband did for Claire and the things I didn't do for her. She complained incessantly, and it began to irritate me. It seemed like Summer was envious of her best friend and how her husband treated her, although she never admitted it. The thing is, Claire's husband had inherited a successful landscaping business from his father, so he had a steady income without working too hard. This allowed him to afford lavish gifts and expensive items for Claire. Whenever Claire received a fancy gift from her husband, she excitedly told Summer, and they would discuss it. However, as soon as Summer ended the call, she would make negative comments about Claire, questioning whether she deserved to receive 2 expensive bracelets in just 3 months. I never brought this up with Claire or her husband because I believed it was a normal desire for a best friend to want what her best friend had. So, when Claire confided in me about her suspicion that her husband was cheating on her, it was a shock. I didn't try to defend him because I knew it would be unwise. Then, as I attempted to empathize with her, it struck me that she should be discussing this with Summer, not me. When I asked Claire why she was confiding in me instead of Summer, her response left me speechless. Claire told me she suspected her husband was having an affair with Summer, her best friend, and my wife. I didn't know how to respond, but I assured her that it couldn't be possible for Summer to be having an affair with her best friend's husband. From my perspective, I was a devoted husband, and I showered Summer with love and attention. While I might not have gifted her as much as Claire's husband had gifted Claire, I still tried my best to give her presents on her birthdays or other special occasions. Despite my doubts, a part of me feared that there might be some truth to Claire's suspicion. My mind drifted away as I reflected on Summer's behavior during the past few months. It became clear to me that Summer had indeed changed. She no longer made time for me as she used to, and there was an inexplicable excitement and radiance about her whenever she was about to go out. Summer had also grown distant, and even when we shared the same room, it felt like she wasn't really there. Our conversations felt forced, and she had lost her usual sense of humor, even when I tried to crack jokes. At the time, I thought it might be a passing phase, but I was mistaken. In addition to these changes, Summer had recently updated her wardrobe with tighter and more revealing clothing. She wore these outfits both to work and whenever she went out, making her appear much younger and more alluring. I wasn't the type to criticize my wife's choice of clothing, so I never raised any objections. Little did I know that Summer had been wearing these seductive dresses to attract her best friend's husband. So after Claire shared her suspicions with me, we decided to conduct our own investigation before jumping to conclusions. Once we returned home, I waited for Summer to fall asleep so I could check her phone. However, her phone was devoid of any incriminating evidence. I also scoured all her social media accounts to see if she had been communicating with Claire's husband there, but I couldn't find any traces. I continued my search for a week and even examined her work laptop, but found nothing. At one point, I felt guilty for trying to find something that might not even exist. Nevertheless, considering how distant we had become in just a few weeks, I was convinced that she was involved with someone, even if it wasn't Claire's husband. On the contrary, I had no knowledge that Claire had hired a private investigator to tail her husband. It wasn't until after about a week and some days of the PI monitoring his activities that Claire's suspicions were confirmed. Indeed, Summer was involved in an affair with Claire's husband. When we saw all the pictures and videos of them together, kissing and engaging in other behaviors that cheaters do, it shattered our hearts. It's hard to say who was the most devastated among us. Perhaps it was Claire, because discovering that the two people she trusted most had betrayed her was an immense blow. As for me, I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. It was painful to realize that all my sacrifices were on the verge of being in vain due to a wife who couldn't find contentment. She always had her eyes on everything Claire's husband did for Claire, and in the end, she betrayed her best friend and wrecked 2 marriages. Once Claire shared all the evidence with me, I made an effort to remain composed. On that initial day, I didn't stay at home because I was afraid of what I might do to Summer. I had to meet with Claire, because she was the only one who could truly understand my pain. After consoling each other, I dropped her off at her house and found a motel to spend the night. Ironically, I still couldn't sleep because I was deeply wounded. Thoughts of Claire's husband being involved with my wife haunted me. It was around that same time that I began to piece together the puzzle and understand why our intimacy had vanished. The following morning happened to be a weekend, so I returned home. Summer was at home, seemingly unconcerned about my absence overnight. Just looking at her filled me with anger, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check, but I couldn't contain them any longer. I felt the need to confront her about the situation. When I mentioned hearing rumors about her involvement with Claire's husband, she went still and asked, "How did you find out?" My expectation was for her to deny everything, and she didn't deviate from that script. She tried to convince me it was absurd to believe she would betray her best friend or cheat on me. She appeared so convincing that I might have believed her if I hadn't seen the evidence gathered by the private investigator. However, I couldn't help but chuckle at her obliviousness, and I promptly took out my phone, displaying all the pictures and videos Claire had forwarded to me. Summer's demeanor changed in an instant, and she contended that someone was attempting to frame her, insisting that the videos and pictures weren't what they appeared to be. I reminded her that these pieces of evidence came from her best friend, Claire, so they couldn't possibly be fabricated. Before I could utter another word, Summer erupted in a fit of rage, shouting loudly. She asserted that Claire was trying to ruin our marriage and claimed that Claire had always been envious of her. Honestly, it was the last thing I expected to hear from her. Summer was quite the actress, and without allowing me to respond, she snatched her car keys and stormed out of the house in a fit of anger. Her departure didn't trouble me because I anticipated her eventual return, but what I didn't anticipate was that Summer would confront Claire herself. While I remained at home reviewing the evidence, I received a call from Claire, informing me that Summer had come to her house and offended her. She had even damaged some of Claire's belongings, and as a result, they were no longer friends. It felt surreal to me because I couldn't fathom why Summer would confront Claire even after being caught red-handed. It simply didn't make sense. Shortly after Summer left Claire's house, she returned home appearing calm and collected, as if nothing had occurred. When I questioned her about her offense on her best friend, her response was, "Because I've wanted to put her in her place for a long time." Her reply spoke volumes, and at that instant I realized I had been blinded by love all along. It became evident that Summer's affection for Claire wasn't as genuine as it seemed. She had secretly harbored bitterness towards her friend's success, and had been pretending all along. Later that evening, when I visited Claire at the hospital, I was shocked by the extent of the harm inflicted by Summer on her longtime best friend. Between the two of them, Summer had always been the more unpredictable, while Claire tended to be peaceful. Claire possessed her own unique qualities, which I believe Summer envied. I had a strong suspicion that it wasn't just about Claire's husband. Summer must have felt threatened by Claire's success and seemingly effortless life. She seemed determined to take away the one thing that mattered most to her. It turned out that Summer didn't just harm Claire physically. She also inflicted emotional wounds by uttering hurtful words that no best friend should ever say to another. Summer vented her frustrations in front of Claire and her husband, expressing how she resented Claire for always acting superior and flaunting her accomplishments and gifts. She even admitted to hating Claire for making her feel inferior. Claire revealed that she was taken aback when Summer unleashed all those feelings, and had no clue that Summer had harbored such resentment for all those years. With this revelation, I concluded that Summer was beyond redemption. If she could betray her best friend in such a manner, there was no telling what else she might do. She had shown herself capable of extreme actions, even bordering on cold-blooded cruelty, and I couldn't envision a future with a woman like that. Never! Interestingly, after her affair with Claire's husband was exposed, she attempted to reconcile with me. Although I've informed her about consulting a divorce lawyer, I haven't initiated the paperwork yet. She seems to believe there's still a chance for us. Her behavior has shifted, and she no longer goes out as frequently as before. Now she's trying to revive certain aspects of our relationship that she had abandoned. She's making efforts to seduce me and cook for me, but her insincerity is quite transparent. Since discovering the truth, I've been dining out, and I won't stop until Summer is out of my life. When Claire and I learned about Summer's betrayal, Claire requested that I keep my emotions in check and maintain the appearance of a functioning marriage for Summer's sake. However, looking at her disgusts me now. I can't bring myself to be intimate with her because my heart is no longer in it. Despite everything she's done, a part of me still has lingering feelings for her. What should I do? Even if we were to reconcile in the future, I fear she'd cheat on me again. We've only been married for 4 years, and she's already been unfaithful. At the same time, I wish I could simply kick her out of my house and toss her belongings onto the lawn, exposing her infidelity to the neighbors. On a different note, Claire officially divorced her husband last week, and Summer has been subtly implying that Claire wasn't a suitable match for her husband. She still believes I bought into her lies about Claire plotting against her, which is quite amusing. She assumes our marriage will return to normal, but she's mistaken. In any case, it's all for the best. Claire has something in store for Summer, and I can't wait to witness her reaction. Most importantly, I'm eagerly anticipating the day I can kick this unfaithful woman out of my house. Update 1. While awaiting Claire's signal, I relocated to a hotel because I couldn't stand the sight of Summer. She repulsed me. In the meantime, Claire has fully recovered from the injuries sustained during her altercation with Summer. She has taken legal action against Summer, suing her for alimony and offense. When Summer was served with the legal papers, she angrily showed up at my workplace, unaware that I had moved to a hotel. She vehemently refused to pay alimony to Claire, claiming that Claire had initiated the fight and she had merely defended herself. I knew this was a lie because when she returned from Claire's house that day, she mentioned something about putting Claire in her place, which didn't sound like self-defense. I informed her that it was no longer my concern. She had created this situation for herself and now had to face the consequences. To make a long story short, Claire had the upper hand in court, and the verdict favored her. The court ordered Summer to pay the alimony and imposed an additional fine for offending Claire in her own home. While I wasn't present for the court proceedings, Claire kept me informed. On the day I returned home, I finally carried out the task I had been longing to do. When Summer saw me, she immediately assumed the role of the victim. I chose to distance myself from her and let her deal with the consequences of her actions. She had the audacity to label me as the worst husband because I didn't support her. She believed I should have sided with her in stalking Claire. When she fell silent, I told her that husbands are meant to support loyal and faithful wives, not cheating individuals like her. What irritated me even more was her attempt to feign innocence and ask me what I meant by that. Seeing that false innocence on her face infuriated me further, and I began to shout at her. I informed her that I was aware of her affair with her best friend's husband, although I had to act as if I didn't know, so she could experience the pain of shattered hope. While speaking, I presented the divorce papers and requested her signature. Upon seeing the papers, she dropped to her knees and pleaded with me. She claimed she had lost everything and couldn't bear losing me. I responded that it was already too late and proceeded to carry out my plan of tossing her belongings onto the front lawn, just as I had envisioned. To my surprise, I witnessed Summer crying and chasing after me inside the house, which was quite unexpected. Nevertheless, I followed through with my decision and ensured that I removed all her possessions, scattering them across the lawn. All of these events unfolded last week, and since then, she has been persistently calling me, leaving numerous voicemails, and sending multiple messages daily on all our shared social media platforms. She even took the step of contacting my older brother to intervene on her behalf, but I requested that he block her, and he complied. I will provide another update once she signs the divorce papers. Update 2. Hello everyone. For those wondering if I felt a sense of satisfaction when I evicted Summer from my home, the answer is yes. It felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I wish I could repeat the act. I asked Summer to leave my house last month. On her last visit, she unexpectedly found Claire with me, which greatly upset her. I know she never expected to see Claire there, and it wasn't a pleasant sight for her. She was also surprised to discover that Claire and I had become close friends while she was experiencing pain and misery elsewhere. Here's an interesting tidbit. After I kicked Summer out of my house, she attempted to return to her mother's house. However, when her mother learned about her betrayal of her best friend and infidelity to me, she disowned her and also expelled her from the house. I won't deny that I took some satisfaction in Summer's reaction when she encountered Claire at my house. I relished the look of defeat on her face when Claire answered the door. We didn't allow her inside because she brought negative energy with her. Perhaps if I hadn't intervened, she might have offended Claire on my property. I sternly warned her that if she ever showed up at my house again, I would have her arrested. Initially, she didn't leave immediately. She stayed and caused a scene, accusing me of cheating on her with Claire. When Claire heard this accusation, she reacted with anger and shouted at Summer, stating that she wasn't a backstabbing person like her and would never betray her best friend by getting involved with her husband. We hoped that after exchanging words, Summer would leave in shame. However, despite everything Claire and I said to her that day, she remained on the porch and continued to argue. Her behavior escalated to the point where it disturbed the peace in the neighborhood, and neighbors began to come outside. At that juncture, I had no choice but to call the police, and she was subsequently arrested. I'm delighted to announce that Summer and I are now divorced. As for Summer, she is completely out of my life. She lost everything: her husband, her best friend, her financial stability, and even her mother's support. To make matters worse, Claire's husband ended their relationship after their affair came to light. I'm sure she's somewhere filled with regret. She got what she deserved. I'm grateful to be part of such an incredible community.